Perek Lamed Daled of Sefer Bamidbar divides equally into two segments. In the first, Hashem delineates the borders of what was to become Eretz Yisrael. In the second, there is a listing of the tribal leaders who would receive on behalf of their tribe the section of Eretz Canaan allotted to them. What is somewhat puzzling is the content of the introduction to the two segments, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicates to Moshe Rabbeinu an obligation to tzav et bnei Yisrael, command the bnei Yisrael v'yamarta aleim, and inform them that ki atem ba'im el haaretz Canaan, that upon your arrival into Eretz Canaan, zot haaretz, the following area, asher tipol lachem benachala. Tipol with the nun fei lamed shoresh, multiple translations, most of which reflect the common thread of movement from a higher level to a lower level, either physically, also in terms of relationships, such as falling out of favor, wasting away, and in this context, describing the process of something coming to an individual unexpectedly. This is the land asher tipol lachem. This is the land that will fall to you benachala as an inheritance. Full stop. The borders of the land of Canaan are as follows, and from Pasuk 3 to 15, the north, south, east, and western borders of Eretz Yisrael are defined. Of interest in this preamble to the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael is the opening phrase Tzav et Bnei Yisrael, a phrase that is recorded a mere 4 times throughout the entire Tanakh, 3 of the 4 in the Chumash. The preamble could have eliminated the opening sentence. The pasuk could have read after the Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, Ki atem ba'im el haaretz Canaan, zot haaretz asher tipol lachem benachla. And more specifically, what was it about the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael for which it was important for the nation to be involved in this decision? A second problem with the opening statement of Tzav et Bnei Yisrael is the use of the word Tzav. If, for some reason, that this information needed to be conveyed to the Bnei Yisrael, the normal wording throughout most of the Chumash is Daber el Bnei Yisrael. Why here have we replaced the Daber with the word Tzav, to command the nation? The Ralbag, who was born approximately 100 years after the death of Rashi, justifies communicating the borders of Eretz Israel to the nation as a whole because they, the people, would be fighting a war with the city-states of Canaan, and they needed to know the boundaries of the land. There are, however, 2 arguments that can be mounted against the position of the Ralbag. The first and most obvious is that if the communication to the people was on account of the impending battle they were to undertake, surely this information should have been conveyed to Yehoshua, who would be the one to strategize and lead the nation into war. Why then do we have the Tzav et Bnei Yisrael? A second reason might be the wording of the text that states Zot haaretz asher tipol lachem, suggesting that the acquisition of the land will fall into their hands somewhat effortlessly, and therefore the context of Pasuk Bet would not be on account of the impending wars of conquest. Rashi suggests that the involvement of the Bnei Yisrael with the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael related to the fact that once they crossed the Yarden, there are certain mitzvot for which they would be obligated to fulfill. These are the mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, a special category of mitzvot that relate specifically to Eretz Yisrael, such as the mitzvah of Bikurim, the mitzvah of Maaser, the mitzvah of Truma, all of which relates to the produce grown in Eretz Yisrael and technically do not apply to produce grown outside these borders. The second issue is the use of the word tzav. A number of words are used in the Chumash to describe a communication between 2 entities. Aleph Mem Reish, for example, Vayomer. A more serious form of communication is the Daled Bet Reish Vayidaber, and a higher level of communication is the Tzadik Vav Hey. To command, a communication that conveys seriousness, one that requires obedience, and hence Chazal read into the use of the word Tzav as a warning, and that warning relates to the possibility that those who felt they were disadvantaged by the results of the distribution that took place through the Goral system would trivialize, delegitimize, and undermine the process of distribution. This reading of the text is reinforced by the wording used in the pasuk. Zot haaretz, this is the land asher tipol lachem, that falls to you. It came to you without effort through the agency of a goral. So that the tzavet b'nei Israel in this pasuk is a warning against undermining the goral system for the distribution of land. Which brings us to question number 3, one that relates to a viewpoint presented during the period of the Gaonim.